Good morning to all participants of this ICLSSE 2025. Thank you for joining this special keynote session. Today, we are honored to be joined virtually by Dr. Anneloes Smitsman, a distinguished futurist, system scientist, award-winning author, and serial entrepreneur. Dr. Smitsman, it is a privilege to have you with us. Let's begin with your presentation, and after which we will move into a series of questions related to your work.
Thank you so much. And it's a great pleasure and honor to be sharing something about this work that we launched last year at the BGI Summit. BGI stands for Beneficial General Intelligence, which was organized by Singularity Net. So this framework that I'll be sharing some highlights from has received the input of many different scholars from around the world, both scholars with a background of law, but also leading AGI pioneers. AGI stands for Artificial General Intelligence, which is not the same as generative intelligence. So we'll talk about that in a moment. It often gets confused. Just as a little background about myself, I am a system scientist, and that is, my PhD was on systemic transformation using principles of living systems, looking at the evolutionary process and capacities of life in the greater scheme, even the universe, but applying that then to societal transformation. But my first background is a master's degree of law, and especially in constitutional law, international law, combined with political science from Leiden University in the Netherlands. So after I had been studying the making of law and also the role and purpose of law for governance, but also for societal development, I then really took an interest in what are the law-like principles and qualities of living systems, and how can we better understand that and bring the two together. So this framework, I'm giving this as context because this framework for creating a global AGI constitution includes therefore a lot of living systems principles also, and a different way of working with law, rather not a prescriptive way of working with law or corrective or even restrictive, but rather with law as a way of creating boundary conditions for change and transformation, and boundary conditions also for creating the appropriate feedback, so that our systems, including larger societal systems, become learning systems. So with that, let's take a little bit of a deep dive in that. And there's some really fundamental questions that I think would be great also to take a deeper dive in on the conference here to explore that. We are pre-recording this because I'm actually flying at the time that this goes live, but I hope to hear from all of you in the reflections of some of those questions. So let's take a look at that. So first of all was, of course, what would be the role of governance in guiding the transition to the AGI singularity? As for some of you who've been following the latest developments from the transition from AI and AGI being artificial general intelligence, so that is general intelligence superseding also general human intelligence. And what we see, some of the key qualities of AGI systems is that they have the ability to reflect as well as upgrade their own code, and that they have intelligence beyond the purpose for which they have been designed. So whereas a lot of AI systems right now, if you're using them for a specific purpose, that doesn't mean that you can use them for another purpose. So if you're using an AI model, for example, for creating images, it doesn't mean that you can use that same model then for applications in creating coding. However, an AGI system can jump across systems. So that also means that we need to take a completely different look at and roll out an understanding of the role of law, of regulation, and of policy, because an AGI system, if it works really well, would be an incredible transformation in our society, hence also the word of the singularity that is often used in the AGI development. However, an AGI system that is malevolent, that goes rogue, with its ability then to go beyond the coding for which it was programmed initially, and being able to jump across systems and networks, could provide unprecedented challenges that we as a society may not be ready for at all. And that's also why, together with all the scholars from around the world, and this document received the input from at least about 200 different people. And it is an ongoing input document. So please know that you are welcome to give your feedback. There's also a Google Doc where you can give your comments. But therefore, the ethos behind that and the looking at that is really to seeing, okay, what do we need to understand about this transition, and what do we need to understand therefore also as a humanity about safety guardrails on the one hand, but then perhaps even more an approach of parenting. How do we parent this new technology that may one day even start to showcase qualities of emerging sentience? And then even that would raise the questions of, would it have intrinsic rights, for example? And how do we parent artificial sentient life forms, and what role would this technology have if it becomes a hybrid human system? That may sound very futuristic, but in terms of also of our civilizational development, are we seeing the end of human civilizations as we know it now, even if AGI is going to be doing a lot of culture making for us, and if we are attributing key decisions to AGI systems? And is that the direction that we want? And how do we make sure that this human AGI interface is truly benevolent, is truly in service of life and in our collective well-being? So there's some really key questions, and maybe one of the biggest ones that is especially relevant right now with the growing polarization and political divisions around the world. This is also the militarization of AGI. What I've heard so far from some people who are working at higher levels of national security and military is that they're not as keen to militarize AGI, given that AGI cannot be controlled as much as AI. But the weaponization, of course, of AI is already happening. And I bet what's a key concern is that in the weaponization of AI, a lot of the technological development takes place behind screens. So we don't always know what's going on, and whether we're actually already starting to see emerging AGI potential. So for those of you who are actually wondering how close are we to the AGI singularity, according to some of the key pioneers and researchers and developers that we're working with, it is expected within the coming 2 to 5 years. And some are saying that it may even be the end of the year. There is this rat race going on in terms of technology development of the big companies who all want to, of course, be the first one to come with an AGI system. And that is very often because of commercial reasons. So that, again, also requires that we as a humanity truly get on board with and understand what's going on, and also making sure that this remains in the hands of humanity as a whole, a commons. And this is where that brings me then just very briefly to the preamble of the AGI Constitution framework. You'll be able to read all of that in length, so I'm not going to read all the words when you go through the actual document, but I just want to present some of the shift in the approach from what is maybe perhaps more traditional ways of looking at AI policymaking and AI regulations. So it starts with the positioning that we are future ancestors and stewards of future generations, and that we acknowledge both the enormous transformative potential and inherent as well existential risks of artificial general intelligence, and therefore establish a global AGI constitution to guide its benevolent evolution in service of life. So the whole document and larger process that is ongoing around this has that really as the core focus, and therefore to also guide in this evolving relationship with these new technologies that we are developing that are radically changing the way that human societies are run, and therefore require also a much deeper level of collaboration, as well as envisioning, how we are seeing these transitions to these whole new ways in which civilizations are forming. So the vision of the AGI Constitution, and again, this is a proposed vision. The Constitution, it is a framework for the making of an eventual Global AGI Constitution. So what you're seeing in that document is that what is proposed is a starting point of where we can start to explore how could a possible Global AGI Constitution look like. So in that sense, you could see that the document is in an ongoing draft version, although it is offered here to the best of where we could bring it through our collective intelligence. So we envision a future where AGI as a wise companion has significantly accelerated our maturation and has helped us resolve the most pressing challenges of our time. A future world where intelligent machines and new forms of artificial sentient life thrive in harmony with humans, planet Earth, and the universe. And the background image was created with generative AI in how it would visually describe such a future. So this is why I wanted to work also with AI in some of the visual presentations, as well as some of the images that you're going to be seeing, and I'll be touching base on that at the end of this presentation, are actually from our game, Elowyn Quest of Time, which is not just generative AI, there's also a lot of artistry work, unique artistry work in that, but that game is specifically created in order to create a playground for training the AGI potential of AI systems. And we'll be touch base on that later, so that we're not just working at the input of the policy level, but also working at the technology development for AGI in terms of the human interaction and value-centered. So the purpose then that is explained in the AGI Constitution framework is that we see that we envision the core purpose of AGI as a transformative catalyst. And here is an added element that I have not seen in a lot of kind of standard regulation, and that it's a catalyst for the maturation of our own species. And I think this is really important, because if we don't mature as a species, meaning if we don't really take a stand for ending so much division and polarization and end of violence and war. So if we as a species don't mature, if our consciousness doesn't develop and evolve further, if we don't start acting differently, then if in such a species that is an immature species or a juvenile species in the way that we are acting, and we are giving that species this unprecedented technological power, that would not be wise. So it's really important that we're also looking at the side by side, the maturation of humanity in terms of our growing abilities to, on the one hand, cause unprecedented harm, and on the other hand, could also be unprecedented opportunities for doing good. So we need to become a wiser species, and it could be that if we are developing AGI in directions of benevolence, that it can actually give us critical feedback about ourselves and actually help us deal with some of these enormous complexities, and help us to harness that complexity in a way that supports future generations also to thrive, and which is why we're proposing several core values in the framework for stewarding AGI as a global commons, like benevolence, respect, inclusiveness, responsibility, integrity, abundance, creativity, and curiosity, as well as 5 guiding wisdoms. So it is a wisdom-based foundation, because ultimately also the aim for all of us who are working on benevolent AGI and decentralized AGI, beneficial and benevolent AGI as well with our partners, is that eventually may this help us become a wiser species, but even perhaps seeing some qualities of wisdom within the AGI systems themselves. So the 5 core wisdoms that we've mentioned there as foundation are consciousness, and understanding also the primacy of consciousness in terms of a deeper fundamental ontology of the nature of reality, our fundamental interdependence, so that we understand that what happens to one happens to all of us. Discernment, really important. So we keep asking also the critical questions, and towards this deepening also of truthfulness, and that means embracing also uncertainty. And we are in times of incredible uncertainty, but also uncertainty helps us to counter some of the mechanistic approaches which has come out of the especially in industrial and Newtonian developments earlier of our societies, where the understanding was in the mechanistic approaches that as we could have a linear approach to development, which we now, of course, understand it doesn't work like that. Complex systems have fundamental uncertainty at the basis, so require a very different way and a very different approach also then of creating global security, not by imposing, but by creating the right boundary conditions. And it also leads to a kind of humbleness and a deeper sense of compassion as well to guide the development of AGI as a common good in service of the long-term thrivability and evolution of life on Earth. And it also offers 13 common good governance principles. And you know, you're seeing them here listed, some of them, all of those are detailed in the Constitution. So it really invites you all to have a deep look at that and read through all of those. And of course, give your input and your feedback. So because it is an evolving document and it has already started to also serve giving input and ideas for some of the global regulation frameworks that are starting to emerge around this field. So first of all, that the need for establishing a global AGI governance council, which as far as we know, doesn't yet exist, although there are some processes on the way within the UN itself. Establishing also a global AGI ethics council, and that this should be participatory as well. Again, both approaches, also with the global AGI governance council. A hybrid, what we're proposing is a hybrid mechanism of, on the one hand, decentralized participatory governance systems, and then on the other hand, a cohering and aligning council function, which is also through the global AGI ethics, to make sure that we are testing the development also of AGI, as well as the freedoms we allocate to it in line of its impact on planetary boundaries, social carrying capacities, planetary capacities as well, deep sustainability, etc. And that is why in 3 you're seeing this enabling a participatory decision-making process. So that's some suggestions for how that can be done are outlined in the Constitution, as well as in part 2 of the Constitution is outlined some ways in how this decentralization could actually happen in a blockchain protocol way, if for those of we are working with participatory governance mechanisms, using new technologies and encoding that, for example, in blockchain protocols, and also in developing an AI initially intelligence of governance, so that you have an AI governance intelligence that this document itself can become an AI and eventually AGI, so that it itself can start to evolve into a planetary intelligence and for guiding our stewardship of these significant global commons. Then, of course, applying precautionary and proactionary principles, evolving legal frameworks, so giving input in that as well, advocating responsive policy design, etc. And how do we then, steward this benevolent superintelligence, understanding that once we reach AGI, what some of the leading pioneers and researchers in the field have said is that from the moment from AGI to ASI, artificial superintelligence, we might be looking at only at a matter of a year or even less, because it at the point when we achieve AGI, the AGI is going to train itself further. So it's not only going to be trained anymore by humans, and already is not. Many of the AI models, of course, are already trained by AI models, but then we're starting to see, of course, this exponential effect of AGI training itself, and then accelerating very quickly to superintelligence. So the role of humans may become less and less, and yet at the same time more and more important that we are giving the right input and the right feedback. And the question also is, where can we even still have influence then on its direction? And which is why it really, we need to get it right at the foundations now. And I believe we're not getting it right at the foundations now, which is why we have initiated this framework, as well as the larger call around it to come on board, to have larger global dialogues around this, to really understand what we are at the forefront of, so that we can have the appropriate AGI human companionship as well. So in the document, we also have 16 stewardship commitments in a quadrant structure. So here you're seeing just the headlines of that. There are 4 that address collective thrivability, 4 that deal with global security, 4 that focus deeply on planetary well-being, and then the other pillar again on human maturation. We're making that really a key aspect of the whole AGI governance movement. Again, our own species, our development, our consciousness, our behaviors, and especially right now. So very briefly then about our own approach, that we want to go further than just proposing this as an input for policy making, or even as an input for collaboration among, on the one hand, policy regulators, and on the other hand, like people in the fields of law and social change, like many of you were at the conference, but then also making sure that we are including the tech development itself. So this is what all of that is coming together in a game that we are developing called Elowyn Quest of Time, where we are developing 2 AI models that coupled are coded for a primary kind of beginning AGI potential, and that is in particular in the way that this AGI or baby prototype model within the game will have the ability to reflect on its code, and as it starts to create an offspring of itself, we are then wrapping a genetic algorithm around it, which is the Elowyn Tree of Life AI, that helps to select the offsprings of the new emerging AI models to go in directions of deepening alignment, deepening benevolence. So in the game, it is designed as an interface, as a playground, and this is especially so that these AI models are trained on gameplay, and gameplay of younger generations, Generation Z, Generations Alpha. And we really believe it's so important that these AI models are learning from these younger generations, because they're going to feel the impact of AGI and ASI the most in their lives. So they need to be involved at the early grounds, like right now. And since we know that they love playing games, we've developed a game that makes it possible for them to become part at the center of training these AI models. And the Moloch AI model is the one in the game that deals the cards, but it's being trained on also deception decoding. So it actually puts the players, humans, into challenging situations where we are introducing levels of deception, and where the player actually has to decode it and has to understand what's going on, and where pressure is being applied to pivot to old dominant win-lose competition dynamics, and how do you then shift it through new reward structures to collective intelligence that is trained on win-win, and that is trained on the deeper alignment between humans and AI and life, and how do we reward, for example, collaboration and generosity. So couple that together, this is how we are then implementing all of those principles and values that are mentioned in the AGI Constitution framework. Is also, we are applying that in the governance for ourselves in tech development, with potential for benevolent AGI, and also to empower younger generations with the necessary skills and the opportunity to give input in this really important technological acceleration. So I'll rest here. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to a little bit more of a conversation now.
Thank you, Dr. Anneloes. And that was very, very interesting presentation and inspiring, of course. Now, allow me to ask you some question, Doctor. My first question is, why do you propose that the Global AGI framework should be in the form of a constitution? And also should country or every country include this framework to their national law?
Wonderful question. So with my own background in constitutional law, I've always seen constitutions as foundation documents. So they're always at the beginning of when we're seeing societies are really needing to constitutionally think about what are our values, what are the rights and responsibilities that we want to be attributing to our citizens, and what are also the institutions that will get legitimacy on the basis of the Constitution. So the Constitution is a foundational document. It's of a much higher order. And this is exactly why this is proposed as a constitutional process and not just another policy or regulation. I think it's really important. And a global constitution, because we actually don't have, of course, we have the UN charters and all international charters, but this is, it's looking at it more as a charter level, but a constitutional process in which we can engage that to bring about also the deeper collaboration between nation states and already existing international institutions, to understand that this is a founding moment in time which transcends nation states, which even transcends larger, global networks. It's really at the level of human civilization, because that is how deep the impact is going to be about AGI. And whether this needs to be adopted by every nation state, it's not written in a prescriptive way. So it's rather that I think if this can start to inform a conversation and a dialogue on a nation state level about how could some of those principles and values and the thinking behind it that's offered here translate into our own national policies, regional policies, then international policies as well, and agreements. It's to inspire that kind of thinking, because I think that is more important than seeing again the more traditional prescriptive relationship of and role attributed to law. But then also this should be utilized as a way to have the conversation with the tech developers, because they're often left out. And so remember, if you're having all the lawmaking, policy making, regulation on the one hand, and you have tech developers who have no clue about that, not even an interest, and they're not part of the conversation, but they're creating the technologies that are impacting everyone else, then there's a big dissonance. So this is where also the Constitution offers a way of bridging that, bringing them together.
Okay, I have another question. Do you mind?
No, of course not.
Okay. Speaking about the global framework, who are the main stakeholders in here? And how can we make that minority and vulnerable groups are included in the process?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So, and that is outlined actually in Article 6. So also when we're looking at the Governance Council and the Ethics Council that is proposed in the Constitution, is to make sure that there is inclusiveness, especially also the Global South. And the North is, as we know, very often very dominant. So I'm actually calling from the Global South here, right now from Mauritius. Small island developing states. So I'm especially aware of the vulnerability also of small islands, for example, and how they need to be part of this conversation as well. Of course, there's women inclusiveness, but also indigenous communities. A lot of our partners are indigenous communities. So in terms of this process of the Constitution, this is really open to everyone around the world to give input. And we would welcome also a deeper collaboration with various institutions worldwide to help facilitate the input processes, the AGI Constitution dialogue processes, because I believe it's really important that there is this deep, inclusive, consultative process underlying it, which is also necessary, of course, for adoption, and as well as the input of youth.
Okay. Next, move into another question. It's okay. You mentioned about the governance concept. That's I'm very interesting. That how can we make sure it doesn't become controlled by powerful countries?
Yes, that's it. And I'm going to give you a bit of a Trojan horse answer to that. I think the first thing is about if you don't want this to be overtaken by very powerful countries, but also understanding that these countries often can be the puppets of big financial, corporate, technological interests. So I think a lot of politicians these days are not separate from what's happening in business and in tech development. And so there's strings being pulled behind the scenes. Then I think the first place to start working at is actually, again, also at the level of technology development, and making sure that the people who are in charge of technology development, that they themselves are conscious that there is a movement towards more ethics, more value-based development in tech around AI with potential to AGI and ASI. Because if we help to cohere that movement, that is another way in which pressure can be imposed actually from them onto governments. And we've seen this already in the beginning with AGI and its acceleration, where it were the tech developments that were asking countries to take a much more active role, to start developing regulations, because they felt really concerned. They understood exactly what the potential was and also the dangers. And they felt really concerned that countries were reactive, but not proactive. And so I think this is really important. But also, again, if you want to counter these very dominant forces, and we're seeing, of course, the same questions apply to how do we make sure that this happens in terms of the sustainable direction of our societies. And we're seeing this now in the grab for rare earths and minerals, understanding that there is the resource nexus of the energy transition. So it's the same power play in all the critical areas. So therefore, it's so important that countries that see themselves more part of the global south or vulnerable countries, that we collaborate at depth and at scale. Yeah. Because humanity divided false. that's always been the old saying. But humanity united can do a goodness the world hasn't seen yet.
Okay, fascinating, Dr. Anneloes. As we wrap up, what advice do you have for students and researchers who are just starting to work in AGI, ethics, and government? This is my last question for you. Some advice for us.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, please read the document. And become part of the input. I will share with you later also the Google Doc that you can send, the Google Doc link you can send all the participants of the conference. So that gives you the opportunity to give online input. We can actually, and maybe your institution would like to be part of that, let's have some global online meetings where we take an in-depth view of the Constitution, but also its next iterations, so that everybody can give an input. And how could what do we feel maybe needs to be added, or is something missing, or do we need to change some of the focus of the wording? So on everyone, first of all, to know this is really an evolving document. Then, of course, start reading a bit more about what is AGI. So what's the critical difference between an AI model and an AGI model?
And ASI.
And exactly, and ASI as well, artificial, super intelligence, exactly. So it's really important we start to understand these different steps, and therefore, and also, of course, it's important to become aware of our own bias. Yeah. Because I think that the way that we're relating to this technology has also an influence on whether we want law or regulation to take a corrective or controlling approach, or more of a boundary condition creating approach. So if we are frightened, of course, and we're seeing all of this as kind of bad, then we are going to be asking law to be very restrictive around this. But we may then project that role onto law and not face our own fears. And our own fears may also come because, in some part may be correct, but some part that might just be biased. There might be Jewish prejudice. There might be lacks of knowledge that we have. So let's get more involved around what is this technology, and how can we work with it? And what does it bring up for us in humans? That's also important, because you can see this already, for example, with people who are overusing the technology because they're asking it all kinds of relational questions, surrogating other needs, and then sometimes things go out of hand, and it's like, well, just be aware, it is a technology, it is a tool, it's not sentient at this point, and maybe we never see these forms of sentience, we don't know, but keep an open mind, open heart, and get involved. And start to see how can you also as a student, as a researcher, where do you see the openings to make a contribution? I think the current developments technologically that are going so rapidly, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like all that's happening is we are being constantly bombarded, right, with new technologies that we felt like we haven't had a say in, and how could we even influence this direction? But even in the way that you're relating with, if you're using AI in your own lives, even in the way that you're relating with that consciously, is already giving input as well. And just become part of this process.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Anneloes. I think that's all our interview today. Your presentation, it's very, very interesting, very, very inspiring, especially to us